What's good, everybody? I'm the G with a PhD, and you're tuned in to the Green Gorilla channel, the place where black men can express themselves freely, straight up, no chaser. Today, I have on the show with me a guest by the name of Dr. Hasan Johnson, the incomparable black man.
What's good, man?
Indubitably the hardest working black masculine. What's good with you, brother? How you doing, man?
Man, I'm chilling. And I'm enjoying this, man.
I hear
I'm
you.
enjoying this.
So, we heard that there was an earthquake that took place in California, and so I just wanted to make sure you were good, man. How's that been? I mean, I'm pretty sure you were in a different part of California, so you didn't have that experience, but or maybe you felt it. I don't know. Like what?
Nah, I'm in Central Cali, so I'm in the middle of the state. I'm about 3.5 hours from the Bay Area, San Francisco and Oakland, and 3.5 from LA. So I didn't feel anything. They had to tell me about it, but brothers like BGS are right down there in Southern Cali, so they felt it. But it's all right. Brothers seem like they're good.
Oh man, it's just BGS. I hope you're good out there, Black Gnostic, man. We want you to stay in the game, bro.
That's right.
Yeah, we want you in the game, man. We don't want to suffer any.
No, I'm still caught in the middle of the fire, so that's where I am.
Man, what's going on in California right about now, then, huh?
Yeah, man. Yeah. This mess is looking biblical up in here.
That's what I'm saying, man. Like an eschatological kind of situation going on.
That's right. I see him coming in the chat. You got Damon. What's up, man? Seventh Coast, NJ Progressive.
That's right.
Brothers are coming through. Brandon.
Well, I want to shout out my members right now because that's one of the things I said I would do related to my membership program. So I want to shout out Roguish the Billmonger, I Care, the Nameless Protagonist, Force Windu, Lady Miss Thing Green, of course, the indomitable BGS Ivmore and Marvin Battle Jr. What's good, y'all? Thank you for the memberships. And I want to shout out Jasper Burns. At this moment, he just hit me on the Cash App, and Brandon also. So I want to give y'all a shout out. Thank y'all so much for joining us tonight. So yeah, we're here to talk about and peace out to everybody in the chat right now. So we're here to talk about this concept that I developed, and I don't know, I don't know, Doc, man. What do you think about it, man? Just from its inception. We're gonna go, but I mean, like, just at first glance, what's your prima facie reaction to it? And thank you, T Fitness, for you. Thank you, bro.
Yeah, when I first saw it, it was of course it was what you and Dr. Neal were dealing with, and at that point, I didn't have a chance to watch that show, so I was like, racial hypergamy. I was like, all right, I'll get around to that, and then one night it hit me. And I said, wait a minute, did this brother just... So then I hit you up on Facebook and I said, look, man, I need you to write out just a definition. Just give it to me. And you did right on the spot. You shot me a definition, man. And we had to slap that up on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And man, brothers went nuts, man, because it was like a missing puzzle piece. And that's one of the things I dig about, this space that we in, because you and I already know we can't have these discussions in the academy.
No.
So it's difficult to advance your thinking on such a concept when the environment you're in is hostile to just the foundation of the ideas. So you can't advance it. So we're here trying to make sense of this thing that nobody wants to admit is happening. And so brothers have to come up with puzzle pieces, and man, that was a big one.
Well, it was mulling around in my head. I just voiced expression to it, and I think that truth be told, a lot of brothers in the manosphere, and I said this last night, and I'm going to say this now again. I think that this space is the only space where you got black men being philosophical about issues related to them specifically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all in the academy, but it's too few brothers that are actually doing this kind of work and thinking unapologetically in the academy. It's just like it's not happening.
Right.
So if it's not happening there, it has to happen somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And if it's got to happen here, it's going to happen here. Bottom line, so yesterday I kind of let the brothers know that, this is the space where it's happening, man. Like, bottom line. And so it's something that, we should all be proud of, that this is actually occurring here. So,
oh man, I put your definition just even on YouTube. I put it up in my community tab, and then BGS shared it. It had 131 comments and 451 likes in just in record time. Because when things hit you like that, when that missing piece is needed, you know what I mean? So you definitely struck a nerve, man. And now it's just a matter of getting people to fully understand, the implications, the ramifications, for them to really grasp what that really refers to, and that's going to be important in this.
Right. So let's just get into it. Right. So the first thing I want to talk about is hypergamy. So let's just start there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to use a website to do this. I hope everybody can see this right here. And maybe it's not as large as, I don't know how large it is for the people out there in the public, but I can see it. So can you see it, Doc?
It's a little blurry.
Blurry?
Yeah.
I'm trying to enlarge it. Is it larger now? Can you see it?
It's not larger, but it's less blurry as far as what I can see.
Okay. Well, anyway, so I have it up here. So let's just go over what hypergamy is.
Oh, perfect. That's much better.
Okay, so basically hypergamy, colloquially referred to as marrying up, is the act or practice of seeking a spouse of equal or higher socioeconomic status or caste status than oneself.
Mm-hmm.
So the term is used more specifically in reference to a widespread tendency amongst human cultures for females to seek or be encouraged to pursue male suitors that are comparatively older, wealthier, or otherwise more privileged than themselves. Okay. So hypergamic behaviors can be explained in terms of genetic economic necessity, in which societies with high levels of gender inequality are more likely to have women who marry up for the benefit of their children, and more likely to have men who marry down to ensure that their mates have a higher incentive to remain faithful. Okay, so, but the word hypogamy typically refers to instances of the opposite occurring, marrying a person of lower social class or status. Okay, so we're just defining things right now, right? Okay, so, and this is a very short piece here. This is not long at all. So I just want to go through it so people can get some framework of what hypergamy is thought to be by people in a popular culture, okay? So in contemporary society, human females can continue to exhibit strong mate selective preferences for spouses who are at least equal to them in terms of attained educational level, job status, social standing, and capital accumulation. In comparison, males tend to place higher emphasis on the value of physical attractiveness in a woman alone. In an anthology about money and relationships by many prominent female writers, the authors express that the role money plays in determining how women select long-term male partners is often considered a taboo subject. Well, not in our community, because not even in the white community, I don't see. But I mean, the idea though that you're actually a gold digger is not, it's not really socially acceptable. But like many men know that this is what women are getting at quite often. Like they don't want somebody broken down and out. They want somebody healthy, financially viable, and so on and so forth. Right. The dynamics in any population. Low status males face relatively greater difficulties in finding long-term relationships due to hypergamic pressures. So in other words, it's hard for you to get down with a woman, man, if you're down and out.
Absolutely.
It's hard to keep a good woman, man, if you're not relatively successful in that society.
Right.
A contributing reason is that low status females still often aspire to obtain mates with greater social standing than themselves. Okay? Now, hypergamy, on the flip side, hypergamy can create difficulty for women with high social status in finding long-term relationships. Very high status women may have to choose from a relatively small pool of men, that being men who are still above themselves in measures of perceived social status. As an individual woman increases in relative social status, there are proportionately less men in the population, in a relative sense, who remain above her status-wise, shrinking the long-term partner pool. Practice is also observed among gay couples. Okay, so you see the side and how it impacts men, and then you also see how it impacts women. Okay. So any thoughts about that? Any discrepancies about that? Any issues that you want to bring up about that?
Well, no, I think it's fairly clear. Women practice hypergamy. Men actually do the opposite, as you pointed out. We tend to marry down, we tend to mate down. That's not our priority, which is always a trick, because in this last number of decades where feminism has had women in many ways mimicking and competing with men, they seem to have this belief that we're attracted to the same things. So, when she gets income, when she has a high status position, they lead with that. And men really are indifferent to that.
Right.
And women don't understand it.
That's because we're not looking for a business partner in the term. I mean, we are looking for a business partner, but not a business kind. It's not strictly business. It is a business, but it's not strictly business. We want somebody we can be compatible with. Someone who will not contest us at every turn. Because what that demonstrates to a man is, okay, well, she's going to be combative.
Yep.
Everything that we talk to her about, she's going to be contestatory about it. Every time we try to offer leadership, she's going to say that I'm not qualified, owing to the fact that I don't have the same degree credentials she has. So that's what we see when we see women play the credential card. It's like, okay, well, so what? I mean, it's cool and all. I mean, we're glad that you're meritorious or whatever the case may be, but like, men aren't selecting women predicated upon, how well they're doing societally. They practice hypergamy, right? So having said all that, I want to move into this concept of racial hypergamy. I'm pretty sure a lot of people have already seen it, but I want to take a look at it again. So I'm stopping the screen here, and I'm gonna get right to it. Okay. And let me make sure that I got this presentation started before I even go there. All right. That way I don't have to work. Well, I got to start it anyway. Share the screen. These things, man, always take time for me, bro. I'm still.
No problem. No problem. Me too.
All right. So what is it? Racial hypergamy. I argue that racial hypergamy is an action in which outgroup women distance themselves politically, socially, and morally from outgroup males from their own race or caste in order to justify greater access to opportunities, positions, and scarce resources for themselves in the dominant society. In essence, outgroup women marry their interests with in-group males, females, and institutions in order to avoid being perceived as a threat to the prevailing dominance hierarchy and to advance themselves. Okay? So that's what I say it is. Okay? It's not, although it can be expressed on an individual basis or on a microcosmic basis, it's not a phenomenon that I analyze microscopically. That's not how I examine this. I examine it macroscopically. And so it's not about how many women or deciding or choosing to have mates from an opposite race, although it can be expressed in that way, but it's not primarily racial relationships. That's not what this is about. Although it can be expressed in that way, but it's not primarily what it's about. Okay. And so there's a difference between social psychology and psychology as a discipline in general, right? So personality psychology focuses on individual traits, characteristics, and thoughts. But social psychology is focused on social situations or societal situations, right? Social psychologists are interested in the impact that the social environment and group interactions have on attitudes and behaviors, right? So this theory is a psychological descriptive theory, right? That is focused on what the social environment and group interactions have on the attitudes and behaviors on outgroup women. That is what this is about, okay? That is what this is about. All right, so what do you think about that, Doc?
Now I want you to continue for a while.
So I'm going to go to the next slide here, okay? So racial hypergamy is not a normative theory, again, about outgroup racial inferiority culturally, morally, or genetically. It is merely a descriptive theory about social arrangements and the intrinsic features of gender-based preferences within social dominance hierarchies. If the theory is correct, racial hypergamy will be present in a wide variety of societies with in-group and out-group populations based on racial stratification. And a large amount of out-group females will utilize the strategy of racial hypergamy to advance their self and gender group interests. We acknowledge that any arbitrary out-group classification could be the variable in gender hypergamy. It could be religion, caste, or ethnicity that is the catalyst for this social behavior, right? For the sake of this presentation, or for the sake of what we're doing here, we're utilizing the variability of race. Okay, so I'm gonna go on. All right, but I don't have I haven't done like a 20-slide presentation on this. So I'm just letting you know. Now, I argue that racial hypergamy can be a tool of oppression, right? So an in-group or out-group racial classification is the standard by which social stratification is established. Dominant men will exploit racial hypergamy as a means by which to stymie the development of out-group males. Often, the dominant males in the society will reward out-group females with privileges and statuses for subordinating out-group males. I got one last slide, okay? Racial hypergamy does not work for men. Okay, now I'm gonna explain why, okay? Outgroup men as a principle can't practice racial hypergamy because it is mutually exclusive with the explicit and implicit features of social dominance theory, which postulates that societies are arranged in such a way that in-group men dominate out-group men. Okay, I missed part of what's supposed to be there, but that's what I mean there, okay? Any personal satisfaction or comfort that stems from selecting women from other racial groups to avoid non-compliant and uncooperative out-group women will be canceled out by the subordinate male target hypothesis, okay? So you can't, as a man, first of all, the dominant society of in-group males, right, is going to try to repress and stymie and block the development of out-group males. It's just going to happen outwardly, explicitly. It'll be implicit as well, but it's what dominance hierarchies are predicated upon, right? If you're an in-group male, you try to suppress and stymie the flourishing and thriving of out-group males.
Okay.
That's what social dominance theory predicts. Okay, and so the people who do social dominance theory, Sedanius and Prado, I mean, they argue that this is pretty much to be found everywhere you go throughout the world. Most societies operate in this manner, right? So my guess is that this kind of strategy is not going to work for men. So what do you think so far?
I think you're definitely on it, man. And I agree with you. I like the way you incorporated Sedanius and Prado's work, and I think it fits. I think the psychological and emotional aggression, or at least the aggression to prevent outgroup men from even finding psychological or emotional stability, is key, right? Because it speaks to a very particular type of institutional hostility that goes beyond just the individual. But the thing that I'm drawn to most with this concept is not the individual relating of men and women per se. See, the piece that I think is absolutely crucial, there's two pieces. One, you just pointed out in terms of how much of this is focused on outgroup men. Even if it seems to be highlighting outgroup women, the final destination is to exclude and underdevelop outgroup men. But the other part that I'm drawn to is where you say in the initial definition, I think on that first slide.
Let's go back to it then. Okay, let me go back to it. All right. You see it?
Right. I see it. So that last sentence, in essence, outgroup women marry their interests with in-group males, females, and institutions. That is fire. Because when you say, in-group males and females, then everybody wants to fight about who engages in interracial relationships the most and whatever. But when you add in institutions, now we're talking about welfare. Now we're talking about housing. Now we're talking about college loans. Now, you see what I mean? We're talking about affirmative action and double minority status. We're talking about the man in the house rule. See, all of these policy-based practices and this all goes into the concept that I talked about on my show a few weeks ago, the promotion-demotion thesis. And I basically make the argument that there was a critical period of time in the 60s and 70s where Black women got promoted into this kind of performative second-class status where at the very least they've been able to maintain consistent employment. And Black men got the war on drugs. You know what I mean? We got increased hyper incarceration. So you can see, and I bullet point them out. You can see the policy-based practices that propelled one group and underdeveloped another. Well, when you marry that to what you're saying here with racial hypergamy, we're not only saying that this is intentional and focused, you're suggesting how the state ends up becoming a mate replacement for women instead of Black men as husbands. Right now, we all know that in the manosphere in a colloquial manner, but you're breaking down on a conceptual level how this is happening. And so when you factor those institutional relationships in, when we talk about outgroup women, Black women in this instance, we are specifically looking at the way they have engaged several, generations of prioritizing a particular relationship with the state in exchange for their own men. And the fallout of that is no more apparent than in this current moment where we are the only community that hasn't been repaired from the last recession, 2008, but now we've gone into this COVID economy.
Right.
And many of the jobs that, Black women have come to enjoy over the last few decades have been drying up, falling apart. They're leveraging their bet on Biden getting elected to try and keep that status quo, but the economy really can't support it even if Biden does, So anyway, all that to say, man, this is so crucial because when you highlight this relationship, not only to in-group males and females, but in-group institutions and policy, and by institutions, I'm also referring to policies, political practices backed by, by major institutions. This creates a dynamic that has to be looked at in context. Has to be,
Right.
So this is what I'm digging so much about what you're doing.
Right. And so look, we already know. Okay, so let me just go into what the subordinate target or subordinate male target hypothesis actually is, right?
Mm-hmm.
It basically claims that subordinate men are the focus of oppression primarily implemented by dominant men, right? Mm-hmm. So oppression directed at subordinate groups will cause subordinate men to experience more direct prejudice and discrimination than subordinate women. That's just what the subordinate male target hypothesis is, right? And so social dominance theory in general claims that societies are structured as group-based hierarchies.
Yes.
Out of which group conflict and oppression, right, arise.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Now within these hierarchical systems, you're going to have these groups, dominant groups, they're going to have a disproportionate share, or they're going to have the lion's share of resources, whether they be economic resources, social resources, capital resources, they're going to have them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the subordinate group males are going to have stigmas, prejudices, and discrimination. That's what the subordinate males are going to suffer from. So the in-group males are going to have capital and economic resources, right? Social and cultural capital and economic resources, whereas the out-group males are going to have stigma, prejudice, and discrimination, right? So, I mean, in general, social dominance theory is going to say, well, there's like 3 different types of social hierarchies, right? So you got age-based hierarchies, where the older people are going to have more cultural capital and more esteem, right, than the younger people. Then you're going to have what they call the social dominance theorists called gender-based hierarchies, where you're going to have men typically are going to be more dominant than women. Okay. And then you have what they call arbitrary set hierarchies. Okay. And an arbitrary set hierarchy, right? It can be ethnic, it can be religious, but in this case, we're talking about race, okay? Because age is natural, right? Gender is, one could argue, I mean, people are beginning to contest this and say that gender is socially constructed. I don't buy that. I think that there are gender-based hierarchies within the scheme of nature, okay? So, but these refer to things related to nature, but arbitrary set hierarchies are just what they say, arbitrary. So it could be ethnicity, it could be religion, it could be, you know, how tall you are, how short you are, it could be, you know, your race. So, but one assumption about this subordinate male target hypothesis is the idea that an arbitrary set hierarchy really is nothing more than the outcome of competition among men over access to material and symbolic resources. So, I mean, that's why you subordinate the other men so you can keep the lion's share of the resources for yourself. That's why you arbitrarily create a means by which to justify the exclusion from other groups of men to resources, their access to resources. That's the name of the game. Okay.
But let's also not forget that at the onset of this dynamic, especially in North America, we were one of the resources, right?
Yes.
Our labor was used to our detriment and to our death for the advancement of their well-being. You know what I mean? So that competition you're pointing out is key because we were intrinsic to them and them expanding their wealth base and their standing.
Correct. But aside from that, okay, now one of the things that people need to be aware of is that, again, this is primarily an intra-male phenomenon, the subordinate male target hypothesis. But racial hypergamy introduces women into participation with the subordinate. That's what the subordinate, this is how this differs and adds another layer of complexity to social dominance theory.
Mm-hmm.
So we all know that on an individual level, what hypergamy looks like.
Mm-hmm.
But on a social level, I haven't heard anybody in any academic
Right.
discipline. I don't know of anybody mentioning anything of this nature. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the only thing that you can find that would even be remotely comparable to it would be patriarchy theory, right? Where men would seek to, exclude women so that they could, somehow gain a lion's share of the resources. But given the fact that there are already gender-based hierarchies within the scheme of social dominance, you can't really apply it, right? So this is something different. So one could argue this is an unnatural, and this is why I tie it to oppression, because, and everybody knows this, right? Anybody understands this. All you got to do is look back at the history of conquest. What do men do when they conquer?
Mm-hmm.
They kill the men and they enslave the women and the children.
Absolutely.
After they win a war. That's if there's a fight. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, it's, to me, this is indicative of a participation in the subordination of Black men in America, right? So that women can advance themselves and separate themselves from that which is essentially perceived as deviant, criminal, and ontologically inferior. So it's a buy-in to in a proximity to whiteness. That's all it is. I'm not going to say that's all it is, but that's part of it. Okay.
Okay.
So it's a way to us, because at the current moment, intersectionality theory is arguing that because they have multiple forms of identities that are connected to oppression, that they're more oppressed.
Right.
Right. So that's the way of thinking. Right.
Right.
But in actuality, and this is what intersectionality really reveals, right? That women are rendered invisible. This is what intersectionality theory actually is trying to articulate, because ultimately women are not seen, they say. So subordinate group women aren't paid attention to. Their issues aren't seen because they're not the prototypical representative of the outgroup, right? But we all know that, I mean, women get raped, and that's terrible, okay? But men get raped also. I mean, and there's nothing worse than that, okay? To be killed gruesomely, that's the ultimate form of, to me, of oppression. Now, people may think differently, but I don't know what's worse than death.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody got something worse than death to present? I'll be willing to live, except for a life of excruciating pain and torture.
Mm-hmm.
But the ultimate is death. Okay, so this is what I think we're experiencing. We're experiencing a group of women that, by and large, have bought into institutionally what they can't gain interpersonally from men.
And see, I think this happens. This is why I appreciate how Sedanius even framed some of these terms, because I do think this happens across civilizations. And I think what we have happening, even with, and I think intersectionality is a bit of an affirmation of it. You have this idea that as women, you will be more welcome in this society than your men if you comply. And we're going to back that up with certain types of incentives. And you have a really mass buy-in, especially if you're coming out of a context of severe poverty and exclusion. I mean, we know the history. You know what I mean? It took us 100 years after the end of formal chattel slavery before we could even vote. So when you're in a context like that, it's easy to actually exchange the stick for the carrot. and lure one whole aspect of the community into believing that they'll be able to enjoy a permanent status that the other half of their own community won't. And here's where we've gotten to with it. You know what the clearest, for me anyway, the clearest, example of buy-in has become, brother?
What's that?
Black girl magic.
Oh yeah.
You're going to actually argue that that none of the institutional or policy-based support that you've had is relevant at all, because what you've accomplished purely from your own magical genius. Meanwhile, your very sons, fathers, brothers, husbands, and lovers are not able to achieve anywhere near that on a regular basis. And instead of looking at the institutional measures, you just suggest that they're trifling and that there's something deficient about them, that they can't do what you're doing. So this notion of magic seems to come in and replace any kind of critical and material view of what has actually propelled them, right? So even the development of intersectionality, where you have this argument, like you said, that they're invisible and they are the most oppressed, while actually, being able to enjoy positions that the average brother doesn't. And it's just amazing to me.
So the difference between social dominance theory and intersectionality theory is that social dominance theory is empirically based, and whereas intersectionality theory, although some phases and facets of it can be presented as empirical, but it doesn't account for the reality that the most extreme forms, I mean, if you look at all the empirical data, you see the most extreme forms of oppression being targeted towards males, outgroup males, not outgroup females, but outgroup males. And now there's many reasons we can, theorize about this, but I think the primary the primary reason why you see outgroup females being able to advance as opposed to outgroup males is the fact that outgroup females do not pose a significant threat for the dominance of males. They just okay. Now, I mean, that might be upsetting to some, but name for me a civilization in which there have been a group of women who internally have been able to dominate a society and take it over and displace the in-group males.
Now that can't be so, man, because every movie I see, they're kicking men through walls and starting revolutions and smacking men around who just can't. I mean, what do you mean? You can't be right about that,
brother. Man, look, you can put like I consider motion picture cinematography to be nothing more than wizardry and propaganda. and it's already known that the government during certain times will push certain themes and get the studios to sign on to those themes. Right? So I'm pretty sure you know more about this than me because you deal with caricatures and iconography as it's presented to the public. But I mean, you know more about mass media than I do. Okay. But if there's a narrative to be pushed, quite typically is pushed through media, right? I mean, you already know, like the first major motion picture that was ever created was a humongous propaganda campaign against the integrity and the humanity of Black men. I'm talking about D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation. Okay. So that movie right there, I mean, kind of unilaterally gave birth to the Klan. All right, so but there's a lot of people hitting me up on Cash App. I want to thank John Bell. Appreciate it, brother. 2Triv211. Make sure D, thank you for your donation, and Vernon King, thank you. Also, brother, like make sure your Cash App is out here too, man.
Will do. I'll put that up there. I do need to shout out Brother Jasper. He shot me in Cash App. So I appreciate that. I'll go ahead and I'll put mine in there. But no, please continue, brother.
So what I don't want to do is make this a moral issue. I want to explain this as a social psychological phenomena that's brought about by conditions that are superstructures, right? As opposed to looking at individual behavior and then trying to make some sort of analysis of person's moral propriety or impropriety. I mean, we can do that. I'm not saying that you can't do that. Okay, you can very well do that. But in all honesty, I mean, what can you expect? I mean, so then the question becomes, well, what's the reaction to this? So this is descriptive. This is not normative. This has nothing to do with how to respond to it, how to countermand it, what Black men should do in relation to their subordinate status, and how to deal with the effects of racial hypergamy, but at least to understand what it is that is happening, so that you, if you feel like you want to strategically sidestep it in any kind of way, to know that it at least exists.
Right. Which real quick, I just want to say that's one of the most important pieces to this. And I've been talking to BGS about this for years. One of the things that I think, yourself, Dr. Neil, Tommy, one of the things where I think we're all doing is trying to give terminology and concepts. But I know some people will say, well, what's the importance of that? It's not practical. Well, keep in mind, you can't often address a problem until you understand it. You know what I mean? And as long as you don't understand it, you're going to keep hacking away at it in ways that are often counterproductive. If your car breaks down and it's the engine, but you just randomly changing things like changing the tire, fixing the bumper, waiting for it to start working, it's not going to happen. You need to assess the problem. And that's one of the things Black men have not been allowed to do, is assess the problem without supervision. Supervision from the state, i.e. white society, even supervision from Black women. Because we've been told that we just have the same agenda because we Black. But that's and if there's a gendered difference, it's only in terms of her experience. And so and I've seen this in the academy as well. When Black men did start to ask questions about their own experience, they were chastised if they did that outside of what was approved of in terms of a Black feminist agenda. So we need to be able to have these conversations and develop these concepts that explain our situation so we can best assess the problem. And as long as you got somebody directing you to what they think you should think about as the problem, you don't really get to the core of it. And so we're all hopping from one foot to the next, trying to come up with solutions to, symptoms and not necessarily, the major causes. So I think the development of concepts like this to help us better see what's going on changes the focus.
Right. But we got a brother here, though, that's saying that he's not a fan of this, because it's all drawn out and it makes things unclear and ambiguous.
I mean, I think, that's his experience. I can't say nothing for him, but I know that for me, it clarified a lot, as did a lot of the concepts I've run across in the manosphere. I'll give you an example, because I'm going to do a show later this week on the 7 concepts that undergird the Black male political agenda that I've been developing. So I'm just going to take one. We're going to talk about BGS for a second, right? BGS articulated the concept of the Black gynocracy. I was working on something very similar, but I wasn't defining it in the way he was. And when he laid it out, I was walking through Walmart, listening to him lay it out live, and I was cussing, walking through the aisles, because not only was he making it clear, it was helping me reconsider experiences going back 40 plus years. You know what I mean? You've had those experiences that all you could do is put them on the shelf because you just knew you didn't have enough at the moment to understand what was happening. You know what I mean?
Right.
So all you can do is put them on the shelf. And when somebody unlocks that door, like BGS did, it just completely helped me understand a life's worth of experiences that now made sense in a whole different way. Now, to somebody else, that may not be what they need to hear at that moment. But I'm telling you, for a lot of brothers, that concept opened up doors to explain things we had all experienced, but we weren't allowed to talk about. I mean, and I mean not allowed. I've seen young women at Black Studies conferences who raised the question of a matriarchy be hushed and pushed out of the room by older women at academic conferences. So, you know, when I say these concepts, these things are swept under the rug, I mean it. I've seen Black men, you know, falsely accused and pushed out of the academy, you know, on trumped up charges. But when you really get to the core of a lot of what they were doing, they were starting to push into a direction that wasn't approved of. So to me, these kind of things don't complicate and make difficult. They actually clarify, you know.
With some people, man, you know, the elucidation of terms, trying to explain phenomena is not their real cup of tea. You know, you can go like I have a I have an analogy to place on this. Either you can be fine-grained in your analysis, or you can be blunt force trauma in your analysis.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people, blunt force trauma, you know, is the way to go. But for some people, they want to use surgical tools.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to be, you know, more clean, and they want to be more, you know, acute in their analysis of a phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm one of those guys who I'm on some acute analysis.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go in blunt force trauma but let me show you how this can play out though on a personal level, on a microscopic scale. So you got a lot of brothers complaining about the ways in which they're continuously running up against trouble in the relationships that they have with women. Okay, so but a woman practicing racial hypergamy doesn't have to be in an interracial relationship. It's unnecessary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is absolutely unnecessary. So you can have a Black woman that has a Black husband with Black children and who may very well love her husband, right?
Mm-hmm.
But still, there's some sort of currency that she gains from being able to attach herself to the dominant culture and society such that she's able to subjugate other groups of men who are in the outgroup male. You know, so let's say, for example, your wife may love you and treat you well, but she might treat other men who are subordinate members of the outgroup, she might treat them poorly. You get what I'm saying? So
as a group,
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there's so many nuances to this. You know, there's so many ways to think about it. I've just begun to explore it, but that's just my idea about it, man. So if there's anybody who would like to,
well, here, can I do something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to share with you some of the, because like I said, I posted this on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. And there were some very interesting responses I wanted to share with you because I didn't know if you had a chance to see them. One brother, as soon as he read your concept of racial hypergamy, shout out to Lucas, first thing he said was Brazil and Argentina. He said Black women engaged in racial hypergamy by the 19th century, which annihilated the Black population in Argentina and changed nothing for the status of Blacks in present-day Brazil. And he attached an article entitled Historical Roots of the Whitening of Brazil. So, wow. So again, you see what I'm saying? You force us to reevaluate what we think we know when a new concept is like a new concept is like putting on a new pair of glasses. You know what I'm saying? And all of a sudden you can see things that you thought you saw, but you really didn't. So when you evaluate something like, you know, skin lightening or genetic cleansing, and even in other countries, you can see the way racial hypergamy actually works in that context.
Right. And then also, look, racial hypergamy can work such that it even countermands hypergamy. Let me give you an instance, right? So you can see a woman who is able to, because she's practicing racial hypergamy, to even engage in hypogamic decisions as it relates to mates. So she because she's been afforded a certain amount of privilege and she has access to things which the subordinate outgroup don't have access to. She doesn't need him, right, for her the securing of the bag, since we want to use brute terms. She can then use him for CompuServe purposes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So she doesn't need you to be a support system. She's already got her support system.
She's already got one.
There you got the I don't need no man.
Sure.
I don't need a man.
Yeah.
What I need is a CompuServe. I need somebody to help. I need a helpmate. I need a wife.
And we can even apply it to proxy violence threat. So what is that? You know, you're having an argument, you and your lady, and at a particular point, she decides that she's going to call the police and suggest that you are being a threat, right? She's threatening proxy violence, against you to control you, even with the threat of a false accusation. But when you put it in the context of racial hypergamy, who is her relationship with that she knows she can threaten you and even do so on false terms and be believed? So when I talked about institutions, that's one of the ones I'm talking about. So when the police knock on your door and you're 6'5" and she's 5'9" and says he hit me and there's no evidence of such, she knows she can be believed.
Right.
And it's not to say that you can't. I mean, you can call the police and say she hit me. And it's not to say that they may not, arrest her, legally speaking. But we all know there are also plenty of instances where men are just not believed, period. But that speaks to the relationship she has with your law enforcement, with the state. And we already know that women are sentenced 65% less for the same crimes as men. So again, racial hypergamy explains that. She has a different relationship with the state.
Yeah, a whole lot different relationship. She's not the threat. You're the threat.
Yes.
She already knows you're the threat.
Yes.
And she's not being under the purview of the state like you are, or the ingroup like you are. So therefore, she can execute the power of the ingroup at her will.
But add in what you just said a minute ago, which is so key to this. This could be your wife. This doesn't have to be, an outgroup woman that's gotten with an in-group male. And no, this could be the woman you lay next to every day. So then the question becomes, how then do you build a response to the things we've been experiencing when her relationship to the state and the institutions that shape and continue to maintain our daily reality, when her relationship to that is much different than yours? You know what I mean? And that becomes, for me, one of the most important questions about this dynamic, because she knows this. She's learned this from childhood. She's watched sometimes great grandmothers, grandmothers, mothers, aunties. She's watched these women run their households and their families. She's watched them control men. She's watched them sometimes run men off. She's watched them have children, regardless of whether or not those men wanted to be fathers, and then measure whether or not these men were the fathers that she imagined they should be, even if they never wanted kids. She has been in a position of authority backed by institutional support for so long. She's seen it happen multi-generationally. She doesn't know how to conceptualize herself, especially in relationship to you, without that support from the state. And this is why so many people are having breakdowns right now. How many celebrities have you seen have been called out for attacking their boyfriends and their husbands, right? What Antonio Moore calls the decadent veil is falling. The point I'm getting at here is the relationship between outgroup women and the state in certain key areas is starting to crumble. And so with that, you're seeing women who are forced to engage men, but for the first time in their lifetimes, and hell, maybe even in their mothers and grandmothers' lifetimes, they're forced to do it without the guarantee that the state is going to work on their behalf in the same manner it has been. They don't know how to conceptualize that.
Yeah, well, here's the thing about it. For the most part, outgroup women are dominated as well. They just need to realize that there's no escaping social dominance hierarchy, and women might not have the most kind of overt and outright violence and subjugation directed at them, but it's still directed at them.
Yeah, but you know how that works.
Oh, I know exactly how it works.
You a slave on a plantation, but you have a blanket. You know what I mean? You have a special place to sleep, and that alone could be enough to make you believe you are better than the other people working in the field right alongside you, or if you get to work in the house. These kind of simplistic, symbolic, kind of thing. Because you're right, when you look at Black women's lives, they're still broke, they're still wealthless, they're still in debt, but they have a job.
Right.
And they have a nice place, or even just have an apartment, you know what I mean? And they have a car. These kind of lower level things for many people still suggest that she's better off, even if materially speaking, she's not. You know what I mean? And these are the things I noticed. Like, I've seen women with college degrees that owe $150,000 to $200,000 in school loans, refuse to date blue collar men who make over six figures with no school loan debt, but she has a nicer car. She has a nicer house and way more credit debt, but she believes she's better than him and he's not worth her time. You know what I mean? Those relationships to, the dominant institutions that allow her to have those symbolic proxy, kind of superiority symbols, are enough to separate us. That's that blanket. That's that working in the house. That's those dynamics that she thinks sets her apart.
But you know what?
Illusions.
So I also postulate, this is just a theory, right? So this is speculation. Okay, I would have to try to figure this out, by means of analysis, through empirical study. But I would guess that outgroup female axiology would begin to, because of racial hypergamy, align with that of the ingroup. So you're going to get aesthetics that are going to align with that of the ingroup, phenotypical, cultural preferences, what they consider to be desirable in partners that they have, right? You're going to have a mirror devaluation of outgroup males. So you start to see emasculation of the outgroup male because they're going to participate in it, right? You're going to have the standards of success or failure co-align with that of the ingroup, right? So those are some things just to be mindful of. I all I'm doing is conjecturing at that point, right? But what I will do though is I want to give a shout out to John Bell. Thank you. 2Triv211. Thank you. And D, appreciate y'all help and support, man. So yeah, man. I mean, it's a theory, man. At this point, what I would like to do, if anybody has any questions, I'm going to invite you so you can ask us some questions about what you think about the concept. You got any? Because this is standard procedure, man. Like we present our idea, you tell us what you don't like, and we're doing this in service of men. That's what, especially us, Black men. That's what we do in service of. So that's all this is, man. To try to give some sort of voice to us and to try to explain what's going on. So, having said that, anybody got any questions they want to ask us about this? And yay or nay, you like it, you don't like it, whatever you feel about it. So we got one person here by the name of Randall. We're gonna let him get in and see what he has to say. Brother Randall, welcome to the Green Gorilla channel. What's happening? How are you this evening?
How you doing? Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I caught the tail end of this topic, and it reminds me of something I read happening in Brazil right at the end of their prohibition of slavery, and how the white dominant society there, by and large, was afraid because compared to the U.S., Brazil had a lot more African slaves, and they felt that the U.S. method of approaching slavery with segregation kind of empowered the slaves in creating their own institutions. And instead of doing that, they encouraged the inmixing, and they imposed a sort of pseudo-slavery on the Black males and brought in a lot of European male immigrants in a way to dilute the identity to slavery in a sense. And within like 2 generations, they had said it'd been complete and that Black people in Brazil had been effectively eliminated spread out in a sense.
Yeah, that seems like to me an instance of racial hypergamy. That's what it seems like to me. But of course, it'll manifest differently in different places. I mean, social dominance is going to be different in different places. It's not going to have the same countenance. It's not going to look the same exactly. But there are going to be some features and functions that are going to be similar. So what we're interested in is laying out the scope. So this is what scientists do. Scientists come up with laws of nature to describe phenomena. And we break it down into a few simple terms, and then we can look at various instances in which social phenomena, kind of falls in line or can be explained in terms of what we theorize about. So,
but
go ahead, Doc.
If I can add to that, one of the things you can find when you look at Brazil is you can see, a color and gender stratification in terms of wealth, right? Where, at the one end of the spectrum, you can see, the more Euro featured people tend to have more wealth. And at the very bottom, you see more of the darker skinned folks who have less. But when you look at that, when you overlap that with gender, you see, males at the bottom end of that spectrum, particularly those that are, more and more Afro in terms of their phenotypical orientation. Now, what's interesting is if you look at a paper written by, oh my God, he's known now out of Duke University for his work on reparations. Darity, thank you, William Darity. He actually wrote a paper a number of years ago about the same racial and color stratification in the United States. And it was very similar to what we talk about in other countries. It's the same thing happening here. That stratification is often articulated in terms of race and color, but often you have to go to a separate space to look at it in terms of gender. And when you overlap the two, you find that it tends to be Black males that are at the absolute bottom of the system, right? And that, to me, is an affirmation of Gigi's concept of, racial hypergamy.
Exactly. The women they've made it so if women want to climb the social hierarchy, they have to marry white people in a sense, or marry white men, and that isolates Black men.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Randall, for your contribution, man. I'm going to remove you from the stream right quick because we don't want to have a prolonged conversation with people who want to call in, but thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to ask any questions about this concept? We got Man Friday coming on. He's about to get in here and add into the mix. Hey, Man Friday, how you doing, my brother? Man Friday?
Greetings. Can you hear me?
It seems like the icon is not working either.
Not too bad,
Okay, so it's not just me then. Okay.
Might be something going on with my system, but I don't know, man.
Well, just real quick, the chat, they did say you can go into the cam mic section, and there should be a button there that says to approve the avatar, audio avatar. But that didn't work in mine. So
it didn't work in mine either. I was expecting that.
Yeah. But I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Man Friday.
No problem, man. I'm glad to be on the stream. Sorry. Just wanted to chime in on the two things. I think it's a very, valid concept that you're talking about. Racial hypergamy. I think they've got examples of that in history. One thing I noticed is that in the book, what's her name? The Daughters of the Trade book, which I think BGS brought to the space, on page 193, it talks about how, is it 193? Let me check. Somewhere in there, it talks about how what she describes as Euro-African females, they never married Euro-African males. Once they become, once they become mixed, they only ever wanted to be European men after that. And that kind of like goes along to what you're talking about, this racial hypergamy concept. Also, if we talk about after the Jim Crow period, after the slavery period, you notice that the mulatto or mixed race population had 1.6 million at the end of the slavery and Jim Crow, and as you know, that would largely have come from the females, because any men would have been castrated and killed for having sexual relations with the females. So it's a long-running concept. It's never really been like quantified. You know, it's only now that people are really starting to look at these things. I believe in my own family. I think 4 generations back, my great-great-grandmother, she was a cook on a plantation, and she had, I won't say she married, she had copulations with the Portuguese. What my mother told me was a plantation manager, which is another word for overseer. You know, so the bedwenching thing goes right back. You know, I got it in myself. So the concept is valid, and I'm glad that you're, you know, I mean, codifying it and putting it out there, because it explains these concepts. Now we're only just now deciphering them. Yeah, you know, it's kind of a hidden part of the story, which has not had any light shed on it. But absolutely, it's all coming out now, you know, through research of different people. So I applaud the concept. I think it's very, very good, you know. What else can I say? Equiano, Olada Equiano, in his interesting narrative on slavery, he mentioned that the female slaves on the slave ship were not chained like the men. The females and the boys were the females and the children were generally not chained. You know, they were allowed to freely mix, because obviously they were having interactions with the sailors and stuff like that. So there's always been an advantage, disadvantage between the males and the females as it relates to our relationship with Europeans. And those are just some points I was minded to say, you know, when I listen to what you're saying.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. We have one guy that's trying to come in here, so thank you, man.
I want to jump off. Thanks.
All right, man. Take care.
Can I just quickly say, you know, you got 171 watching from what I could tell, and that doesn't even include Facebook and Twitch. Y'all make sure you guys share, like it, sign up for membership with GG. I'm about to set mine up myself, so support the channel, y'all.
And also go over and support Dr. Johnson's channel over there. You know, he's almost at the precipice of reaching that 10,000 subscriber mark. We want to get him pushed over there. So go ahead and do that for that brother. All right. So having said that, and you can leave a link and stuff like that in the chat so that they can have access to your channel and how to get into contact with you.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So I'm going to bring in another guest here, Liquid Osalat. How you doing, brother? You're Miss. You're on the. Oh man, he went in and went out.
Well, if I could say, as far as the last caller, I appreciated his contribution, and I also wanted to say it's important to note, because of the way you broke down racial hypergamy, it doesn't have to just be, you know, somebody dealing with, you know, a person of another racial background. It can be, you know, the very woman you've known your whole life that only has married and related to black men. But again, that component with you know, the institutions you point out is key. And I think that's one of the things we got to keep in mind as we deal with this.
Yeah. So let's bring in Liquid Ocelot. Are you there, brother? Liquid. Man, you going in and out. Liquid. So I guess Liquid is having technical difficulties. But while he's waiting, we got 1012. 1012. Where you
Yes,
at?
sir. Yes, sir. Good evening.
Green Gorilla channel.
Thank you. I listen to your stuff a lot. I have a question for you, because I never heard the term that you folks you brothers are discussing tonight. When I went to research this term, this is about racial whitening and the coloring of the mind. And this was designed by the Brazilian white supremacists to destroy black people by having black people mix with non-black people. And that's when black will disappear.
Okay.
And I'm a student of Nellie Fuller Jr. And one thing that Mr. Fuller said in his revised expanded edition of the code book is race is only a term used for color. Race is color and color is race. You can't separate the two. The only reason why we're being mistreated is because of the color of our skin. Sounds idiotic and sounds totally ridiculous. but the smartest and most powerful people who classify themselves as white figure that this is the best arrangement we can have on the planet between white people and non-white people.
Oh yeah, the racial classifications are arbitrary classifications to begin with. I mean, there's nothing innately intelligent about having, being white. There's nothing negative about being black. I mean, all varieties of different kinds of ascriptions and qualities and characteristics, you find them mixed throughout all populations on the planet. So some people are going to be beautiful in white, and then some people are going to be ugly in white. I mean, you know what I mean? And some people,
yes.
I mean, some people are going to be like brilliant and intelligent and be white, and then you're going to have some brilliant and intelligent black people, right? But you're going to also have some incredibly dim-witted white people, and then you're going to also have incredibly dim-witted black people. I mean, there's nothing inherent in the color of a person's skin that has anything to do with all of these positive qualities or ascriptions that we assign to the races. So it's an arbitrary set way of creating dominance or justifying the subjugation of a specific population. So
there's another thing I wanted to discuss here as well. Yes, by the black male, and we, compensatory counter-racist language, I don't use the word black and all that stuff. I use white, non-white. The white people on the planet have always been at the bottom, and that's what the white supremacists have intended it to be. The question is what do we as non-white people who are abused, dominated, and subjugated do about this problem? And how do we go about being effective? Because Mr. Fuller always says you have to be effective. The moment you are effective against the system, then you become a threat.
Well, let me just say this. And
yes, sir.
Thank you for the contribution, man. I got some other people who want to chime in, so I'll get back with you a little bit later. But thank you for your contribution. So this is what I want to say about that, man. Look, the nature of men throughout the throughout the annals of time, has been to try to find a way to deal with their environment. And that was taught to me today. A brother kind of brought that to my attention today. One of my frat brothers, William Ruffin. I mean, ultimately, he says, look, man has been resisting against nature. So, I mean, you got African men on the savannah and dealing with the rigors of nature. What men are facing now is no different. I mean, if there's a dominance hierarchy, then there's something to resist against. But I mean, how do you resist against something if you're disconnected and you bought into neoliberalism and you bought into the idea? Because what I do know is that our perception of the world is manufactured by philosophy of men who are long and dead. I mean, it just is. But people won't see it because they're mired in it. It's like BGS said yesterday. You can't see the forest for the trees. You're a fish in the water, so you don't observe the water. Like so you don't pay attention to air. You just know that it is what it is. But like a fish thrust into air is going to have a different experience with it and see different kind of qualities about it than we would, right? So at the end of the day, men have to resist against the environment if they want to have some impact over it. Bottom line, I mean, it's what we do. So having said that, any more any other closing remarks you want to make, Dr. Johnson? Because we got this one guy he keeps trying to chime in, and he keeps missing it. But
what is it? His mic?
I don't know what's going on, but for whatever reason, he can't get it right.
Okay. No, I think you're on it, brother. I think
there he is. Let's see if this is the last time we're gonna give him time, man. Brother, Liquid, man, we've been trying to get you in for a minute, man. Are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, man.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry about that. I had a lot of technical difficulties. Sorry about that. Yo, TSI, what's up? How you doing, boss?
I'm doing good. How about yourself, Liquid?
Everything good. I'm on Facebook, but I'll tell you who I am later. GG, man, I love your stuff. Shout out for the Pan African video. I left a comment on that. That was a beautiful video, man. I'm enjoying the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you, brother.
Yeah, man. So basically, I just wanted to add emphasis on like the whole situation that's going on in regards to the male dynamic, and there's been a, you know, it's funny I'm having all these conversations, and I came across the whole check after Diop book, the cultural unification of Black Africa. So when we talking about these dynamics about the whole male and female emphasis, there's been a huge cultural shift with what has happened to Black African males in regards, and a lot of the emphasis is like on culture. I don't want to sound like too like far-fetched, but there's been a significant cultural change, and that's why a lot of these dynamics I feel are kind of different. Because like for instance, for example, like when I'm reading the Chick Antadia book, he talks about how a lot of African cultures were matrilineal in essence. But when I say that to say this: there was still a male emphasis that was needed. And what I'm basically saying is like, in this current paradigm, I feel is like, due to the fact that certain situations has happened to us through the diaspora, and we've been undermined culturally, it makes us look like collectively look bad. You understand what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah, I get it.
yeah, it's like, so basically like I said, we had certain things that were going on where there was an emphasis on the male still, due to the fact that all this colonialization and racism and all this other stuff, it destroyed those cultural dynamics where the males were still looked at as something important.
Yeah, well, you know, I get exactly what you're saying, brother. Hold on, let me. I want to give a shout out to the Drunkard Cat, and also I got a new member, WPL1. Appreciate your contribution, brother, and thank you for becoming a member.
I need to shout out Watkins. Appreciate the Cash App support, brother.
So, yeah, I mean, unless anybody's got any more questions for me, man, I'm ready to kind of like close it out. But you know, I really appreciate being able to get in this space and be able to present these ideas. It was just an idea. Some people don't like the idea. Some people like the idea. Some people have things to say about the idea. It's an idea. And
well, I think it has. I think it has foundation in history. I think it has foundation in everything from politics to economics to religion to sociology. I think it has foundation in all of those different areas, even in our contemporary reality. You know what I mean? So I think that to me is the measure of a good idea, when you can see it manifest in a variety of different areas. So then the question just becomes, is there a prevailing logic that links all of these areas, or does it manifest differently in different contexts? That's where, you know, the next stage of advancing an idea comes from. But I think what you've hit on is something that has merit and has weight, and it needs to be treated as such in an effort for us to really better understand our situation. Because that's really all we're trying to do with these ideas, is better understand where we're at and what's going on. You know, especially considering how long it's been since Black men have been allowed to do that on their own terms without shaming or silencing.
Precisely. So what we're doing is what's called consciousness raising or disclosure. I mean, that's all it is, trying to figure out or assess what is the situation, what exactly is happening, and as opposed to just, you know, like going back and forth explaining what irritates us on an individual level. Right? It's just like, okay, well, we know that there's some things that are irritating us. What's actually happening? If we sit back from a panoramic perspective and take a look at it, what's actually happening at a macroscopic social level? So it's just my stab at it.
Can I ask you a question before you? Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead, brother.
When you take this concept and you apply it to white women who are now being outed for mimicking Black women in the public, how do you make sense of that in terms of racial hypergamy? What is it we're seeing when white women are willing to imitate Black women for social advancement? What does that say about Black female life, What does that say about black male life, that we're not seeing white men imitating black men? You know what I mean? Where can racial hypergamy take us in terms of concepts like that, in terms of situations like that? What do you think?
Well, I think that at the current moment, you know, black women, let's just face it, man, like intersectionality is the going thing in academia right now. And it gains you a certain amount of market based,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know, it gives you some sort of capital there. And so you're going to see people emulate this kind of, you know, this performance precisely because it pays off. It pays to be a black woman right now. It pays to say, because women, let's face it, the dominant group of men know that black women aren't the most oppressed group. They know this because they're the ones that set the schemes into motion to oppress the dominant, I mean, you know, the subgroup males. They know this.
Yes.
They're perfectly aware of this. But for some reason, you know, I hate to say this, but I mean, you could become so drunk on theory that you divorce yourself from reality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of black women, you know, have divorced themselves from reality. I think that a lot of what they're doing is intellectually dishonest, and it might be based on their personal experiences, but they're not the only persons with personal experiences. Mm-hmm. Like, and so at the end of the day, there's a certain kind of market-based currency that being a black woman has right now. And it's primarily because of racial hypergamy. I mean, that's what I would say. And so you will see Rachel Dolezals, you will see what are they called? La Bamba, what's her name? La Bamba Bolero. That's what I call her, La Bamba Bolero. You know, I mean, but you also see this with white guys too. I mean, you see your male wiggers or whatever the case may be, but none of them, except for perhaps maybe Sean King, none of them actually try to perform as a black man. Like who wants to do that? Like, first of all, it's not easy to do and to begin with. Like, because black men pretty much, they're able to sniff out bullshit when they see it, bro. Like, come on, bro, you ain't part of this for real.
Hey man, I know you see who just stepped in the room.
Big Neil, what's up? Live out loud, baby. Live out loud. Live out loud. Hey, look. I saw Ron O'Neal today, man, put out there something that tripped me out. He said, man, she's 40 years old and listen to Cardi B and Meg Thee Stallion. I said, oh my God, man. That's my man, Ron O'Neal. Let me put him up.
That's right.
Donation, my brother. He says, racial hypergamy demands that we reread history, especially slavery and colonialism. In general, women are not loyal to their respective indigenous groups. I mean, especially if those groups are conquered. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be, I mean, because if the society is going to afford them a certain set of privileges that they're not going to afford the males, then we have to acknowledge the reality of that. Yep. But intersectionality does not acknowledge the reality of that. It's the exact opposite. They're making the exact opposite case. And this is what, you know, like, this is what if black men are dying, they're not able to graduate from high school. They are in a situation in which they're being killed extrajudicially by the police. They're in a situation in which they're pitted against one another and they're killing one another at accelerated rates. Mm-hmm. If they die in poverty and they die early, there's no diagnosis of their diseases. You know, they're getting siphoned off from kindergarten to prison pipeline. Like, there's something fundamentally flawed about what's going on with black men. And for us not to be able to say it because there's a theory which is predicated upon an ideology which says that multiple forms of oppression make you more oppressed and that you suffer more. Like, that's not the whole story. And so we have the right to tell the entirety of the story. We got to fill in the gaps. And so, you know, I'm tired of having to be silent. I'm tired of keeping my mouth closed. I'm toxic.
Well, I also want to shout out Seven Coast Dojo because he made an excellent point about the relationship between Black women and solipsism. And when you think about solipsism, you know, in the sense that, you know, nothing exists for some people outside of themselves. When you look at the demand of Biden to take a Black female VP candidate, when you look at the push for a certain Black political agenda that doesn't speak to the particularities of Black men's needs, that's a degree of solipsism that we've become aware of. But again, if you look at it like Dr. Neal is suggesting, through the lens of racial hypergamy, that solipsism comes out of a very particular context where they are allowed, at least, even if nothing more than a symbolic access into, you know, the larger society at our exclusion. That's for them. That provides the rationale for why they're the only ones that are relevant in the situation. They're the only ones that exist, you know, and that's where that solipsism comes from. So I think Dr. Neal and of course Seventh Coast, they're hitting on something extremely important. We actually have to reevaluate history to make sense of what you've developed here. This lens that repositions race, gender, and particularly from the vantage point of Black males, turns on its head potentially much of what we thought we knew, but we have to look at it through this new lens.
Right, and look, brothers are expressing this. It's not like we don't know this, but it's not been put in academic terms. You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, we're here to refine that which exists in the rough, to reveal and to open up that which is ready to be opened up. And I'm not by any stretch of the imagination claiming that I'm some sort of brilliant dude coming up with an idea. The idea is already there. I'm just giving, I would think, a more nuanced expression of it. You know what I'm saying? That's all it is, man.
Well, it's not, and it's not about, it's, you know, it's not about blowing smoke up your behind and say, well, this idea is the only. I'm saying it's a missing puzzle piece. But if we put it in connection to other puzzle pieces, it gives us a larger view of what what Black men in particular are trying to put together in terms of how we see the world and how we approach things. You know what I mean? So I think when we take what you've developed and we add it to what BGS has developed, what I've developed with Neil and Curry, and you know what I mean? And we start piecing it together, Valdez, you know what I mean? You start putting all of these things together, you know, to me, I'm like, we forming like Voltron, you know?
Hey, man, let's form, man. You know, let's form like the fiery phoenix from the G-Force. I don't know if you remember that, but that's how always feeling I have. You know, I want to give a shout out to Charles Gilmore III too. Thanks for the donation, sir. This is what he says: whatever gives children the best chance of survival is what most women try to achieve. Other than social contracts, they're going to do what ensures the best chances for their children to thrive. You know, and that's hurt me. Yeah. That's interesting because I think that for the most part that's true. But you know, also I want to say this, and I've said this many times, but I think I need to continuously repeat it because a lot of people think that the social arrangement in the Western world has been one in which men have not been the primary caretakers of children, or not been like the primary who've been responsible for the care of children. It's been men up until maybe like 150 years ago who were considered to be the primary caretakers of children, not women at all.
Right.
And you know, that gets lost on us because of the new situation that we find ourselves in. And this is primarily because of some laws that were passed by the British Parliament. I mean, it is what it is because they came up with something called the Tender Years Doctrine. And before that, I think it was called the Care of Children Act. I can't really recall, but I mean, the whole point is, prior to that time, men were the primary caretakers of children, not women. If a woman got a divorce, the children went to the man. Right? Oh, there was no, well, children are what's in the best interest of the child. That's the new standard right now, best interest of the child. But it had never been thought that what's in the best interest of the child was to go with women. It's always been thought that the best in Western culture in general, because it's primarily patriarchal, right? And patrilineal as opposed to matrilineal.
Right.
So But things that have changed, and I think primarily it's men that have changed it. And a lot of times men do things and they don't know the unforeseen consequences of the choices they make. But I mean, they use whatever tools they can in order to preserve their advantage. I mean, that's just what men do. So they're using, and women are doing the same thing. They're just using the system to work to their advantage, and it's to be expected. So, but at least if you know the truth about the matter, you can have a better way to respond to it. Because for every action, there's a reaction. And just because one group of persons been conquered doesn't mean that group of persons will always be conquered. The tables can flip. Right. What's up can be down. It happens all the time. But this leads me into a segue. So what I want to do for my next show is I want to have a discussion about something called, but this is philosophical and political, but I want to have a conversation about what conquest looks like and the different kinds of reasonings that occupy the minds of conquerors versus those that are under threat of being conquered. Like what do they think? What kind of arguments do they make? What's the rationale, right, for both parties? But in the end, I'm going to use something called the Melian debate. Okay. So it's about the Athenians and the Lacedaemonians. So we're talking about Spartans versus Athens. Okay. And in particular, it's an island on Melos, and there was a debate between the Athenians and the Melians about whether they should be conquered or should they fight, because they were given the option: let us enslave you, and we'll spare your lives. But if you want to fight, we will destroy you, and we're going to take your women and children. What do you want to do? And we'll see how it ends up. But
what I think would be interesting to look at too is the very particular types of experiences the very continent of Africa had in regard to enslavement. So one of the things I talk to my students about whenever I have to teach slavery is that there were multiple slaveries. And if you look at the Arab slave trade, and if you look at the transatlantic slave trade, there are some very key differences in how those conquests of the continent took place and the cultures that those people came out of and how that shaped their behavior, their choices, their policies, and their practices. You know what I mean? And so I think there's some interesting implications there that you've got me really reconsidering with this concept.
That's a good thing, then, brother. I'm glad to be able to make the intellectual contribution, man. And I got help from the people in the manosphere. So
that's right.
So I want to give a shout out to Constable Murray. Thank you for the donation, sir. Anybody else got any questions for us here? If not, we're going to begin to wrap this up. I really want to thank BGS, Ibmore out here. I want to thank all of my subscribers, to all the new subscribers too, and the new members. That's right. And, I want to thank you all for joining us here on a Saturday night. I mean, it's a Saturday night. Like, why listen to two academicians pontificate about something that you don't agree with or that you do agree with? But thank you for joining us, man. That's all I can say.
Yeah, thank you for having me too, brother. Appreciate it.
And look, man, go push Dr. Johnson up to 10,000, man. We got to get him up to 10,000.
Oh, much appreciated.
Yeah, we got to get him up there. So, any closing remarks for you, Dr. Johnson?
Nah, man, I think you hit it, man. And like I said, you got me reconsidering. So that's when you're an intellectual, you love that. When something forces you to rethink your whole world, man, that's when you're growing. So shout out to you, brother.
Well, thank you, brother. Thank you. I appreciate it a whole lot, man. I really do. So peace to everybody out there in the chat. All the people who are listening. So y'all be peaceful, y'all. Oh, wait a minute. I got one. She got Kendra's got a question, so I'm going. I gotta defer to Kendra right here because I rock with her. She says, "Green Gorilla." So racial hypergamy equals a woman's decision to adopt the attitude, actions, or ideology of a different ethnic group in order to climb the social ladder, more or less. That could be part of it. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't exclude that. Yeah, because part of it is axiological. It's value laden. So yeah. I would say that, yeah. And then but the other component is you begin to emasculate and devalue the outgroup males.
Mm-hmm. You always got to bring it back to that. Yes.
That's also a component of it because they no longer become valuable. If they're not valuable to the in group,
Mm-hmm.
they're not valuable to the outgroup female.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what it is. So having said all that, thank you, Ronan Martin, for becoming a new member. I appreciate that, brother. So having said all that, we are going to close out. Thank you so much for joining us here, and keep it good, man. Keep it good, man. Be successful and keep your heads up. One.
Peace.
Peace.